other countries and other locations, it seems realistic.
Just to clarify, is there a basis like $5,000 a host or $2,000 a host?
It all depends on what you have to do. There was a project called the Internet Cost Analysis Modeling Project, run by the Big Ten universities in the United States, plus one other one that I forget. Their cost model includes a way of calculating damages based on the amount of time that you spent for each person, what their annual salary is, do the math, add it up, 20-some% overhead figure, and then plus or minus 15. I used that model with the HoneyNet Project Forensic Challenge to try and show what it took for an individual or a group to do an analysis of a compromised system to figure out basically everything that was done and to try and do the tracking of who may have done the intrusion. If I remember correctly, the average, we had 13 people who submitted entries. The least amount of time spent was 10 hours. The most time spent was 3 people, total of 101 hours. The average was 38 hours. I used the ICANT model saying annual salary of $70,000 US, which is sort of mid to high level for a system administrator, and that turned out to be like $66 per hour, and the damage was $3,000. If you bring in a consultant, the cost is going to be like $200 to $300, sometimes as much as $500 per hour. So that cost for one single system, 1 hour's worth of work in every single system. But in something like the case of Code Red, where you have this new worm that's out there, somebody like me and other people will volunteer our time and spend days literally going through and trying to do really detailed reverse engineering. So you can't take these cost figures really at face value because they have no basis in actual amount of people, amount of time spent. They're just sort of doing back of the envelope calculations. But at least what I was trying to do with the forensic challenge was show that it is possible to do a cost analysis for an individual case and then try and extrapolate that across the rest of your organization and go back and say, I believe that we're spending $500,000 a year on incident response across the whole organization. And you can at least get some leverage there.
There's also a lot of ostriching that goes on within certain realms, especially academia, where they don't have the funding to be able to provide the funds to cover the costs of repairing and dealing with these types of incidents. And so they just say, I'm not going to deal with it at all. I'm sure that Dave has encountered this, where the funding, if it costs from a local computer support organization $300 an hour or $100 an hour, whatever, and the grant can't cover it, they simply don't do it. And so those are costs that still exist at some point because that system is still infected, it's still causing problems. It will come back and become more of an issue, but they're not necessarily cost accounted for in any of these models because nothing happens except for more problems.
Yeah, at the University of Michigan we have an IRC server on the EFnet, and it's been down for weeks. Who cares, right? I mean, the university certainly doesn't, so.
Another question?
Yeah, I think in-band signaling is just faulty by design, and IDS is a way to go is a way to go, and it's an improvement. But how do you think about distributed IDS? Is that good or is it bad? I think it's bad for privacy, but it can help a bit.
Actually, it was something I was against if it's done in a non-transparent fashion. But right now it's along the lines I and my company are developing, but it is not. It's distributed, but not in an automated way, which means you have evaluation, and the contractors, like the people who install the IDS, at least that's what we're planning. They can decide what they do with the data, which will be, of course, just signatures, matching signatures of actual attacks, and not we will have precautions inside this thing that nobody can actually sniff the real traffic, that nobody can change this. And yes, it's very delicate matter. You have to do it the right way, but if you do it in a half automated way, and you have actually all these statistics you can correlate to, that's going to help you a lot. Because what I said was like preventing things at the source was like I meant preventing the first attack, like preventing attacks when they occur. Not preventing anything of the DDoS cycle, but initially making the net more secure with correlating IDS signatures, IDS logs.
Yeah, I'm actually very skeptical of that because I don't think that we're going to get the kind of deployments of those systems at the edges enough scale to actually make a difference. I think that the only way to actually address this problem is going to be by turning it into a network problem and working on it closer to the core of the network. Preventative measures. I mean, we could have detected, sure, all the code red hosts on the internet as they were being infected. But I can guarantee you that probably no more than a third of those hosts would have been patched immediately. I mean, the rest of them all are just the infection stage itself is really what's causing the problem. I think it really becomes a network problem and not just a security problem.
It's also it's largely a matter of approaching the right people, like approaching the big infrastructure providers on the internet and like. From there on, like actively approaching the people, like when they have a security problem, they don't necessarily come to you, and you have to approach them. I don't know. Well, I think it's important because there is like a mass of people who are not security aware, and how are you going to reach them if not actively?
Well, that's the thing. I think it's impossible to actually, which is why you have to find a scalable solution in the core of the network. But
has anyone ever tried doing this? Like. I'm not sure. I don't know. Well, we want to try.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay, last question.
Hi. I was working last year on my final thesis for my diploma on my university at Links, London Internet Exchange, one of the biggest exchange points in Europe. And I developed a tool to trace and detect distributed denial of service attacks. And it worked in a distributed way. I tried to work with ISPs together. The problem was, they said, we're all interested in this, but the problem is we have to fight political fights to justify money. Yes. We have to fight against our law department more or less to get this signed off, because if we want to exchange information, which is whatever related to attacks or about our network, we can't do this. Our policy doesn't allow this, so we basically can't work with you. One ISP which went bankrupt, Gigabel, for example, they tried to do this, and I had only 6 months' time, and it took them 4 months to get a paper to me, which I can sign a non-disclosure agreement written by their lawyers. So in the end, my tool was ready. It was working in the laboratory. It was working in the university. I wrote it so I could see the hosts in the university which were attacking or were attacked. I was able to see the agents which are contacted by the hacker, relay the commands to the attacking agents, and I have everything ready basically. But in the end I gave up, and I think the ISPs don't deserve something else like that, because they're hit by this traffic and they want everything, whatever, they want something against it, they've got an offer and they let it down because of money or whatever, and then they suffer millions probably.
Make it free.
Could you state that as a question, please? No, actually, let's let the panel answer that and make any final statements.
I think the problem is that you're giving them too much information, and it's not just a money or like SLA issue. It's actually a policy issue. And probably if you are producing information, if you're giving them information of that fine-grained detail, there are probably all kinds of privacy considerations that come into it that they can't deal with.
I know that. I developed a schema because I said, okay, they can share information about everything. And then the ISP said, we don't want to share information with this competitor. So I developed a protocol which says, okay, you can share this information with this ISP, but not this one.
Yeah, I think that's...
They were not interested.
Yeah, I apologize for critiquing it, but I think it's the wrong approach. I think the only way you're going to surmount these sort of institutional problems is by taking it as a constraint in your system, and then producing only the information to them that they already have. So for instance, as a downstream small ISP that's being flooded, if I go to my upstream ISP with just either calling them on the phone or in some programmatic manner and give them information about the attack that's already transiting their network, they already see it. They just don't know that it's a problem for me.
Okay, maybe they see it, but what happens if the attack is whatever from the US and they're all sleeping?
Well, then you simply need to filter.
You can't do anything about it because they're sleeping.
But then you need to filter it at the point closest to the ingress. That's all you can do, right? I mean, if you only have like a T3, but your upstream provider has an OC12, and the attack traffic is coming in as OC3's worth of bandwidth, at least your upstream provider could potentially do some rate limiting for you, car or whatever, or actually installing a real filter or black holing or something. But there's still things you can do in the network to address the problem. I think that going to the original source of the problem may be the best solution, but it's not always scalable. If you're being attacked from 100 different countries, you're not going to try to go call all of them.
I care very little about the agents, attacking agents. My focus was on the person which is behind and drives the agents.
Right.
And I was able to see these guys if they were online and talking to their relaying agents.
You see one of the stepping stones that they're using. I mean, the smart ones don't log in from at home with their AOL dial-up and run the distributed NL service network. So trying to do traceback, even if you have a traceback protocol in place, is only going to get you to one machine within a large series of hops. And you're not going to be able to automate actually going back and finding the person that's typing at the
Yes,
key.
I understand that. This is why I started a distributed approach. That's why I worked on exchange point level and not on whatever department level of a university.
I think your tool would be really, really interesting for law enforcement people, but probably less so for service providers who need to take immediate action. I think law enforcement would love to have your tool because it would provide them with lots of forensic information to do the sorts of things they need to do. But
I know they were talking to me in the UK, but I thought ISPs are more sensible for this.
Anyone else want to say anything before we close?
I think that part of the problem that you highlighted goes back to what I was saying earlier about the collaboration fact. I think ISPs, the techies, love to get along with other techies, but as soon as the lawyers get involved, things get more complex. Didn't used to be that way. It was really a very short time ago, unfortunately probably before some of the people in this room were born, when the internet was all about fun things and research and science and collaboration. Maybe if we sort of bring a little bit more of that back, you'll see tools like yours and ideas like yours brought back again. But you're still going to have the administrative hassles and the overhead of the law side of it. Complex agreements just for peering of internet traffic itself are that thick. So I think that is part of the solution is better collaboration and information exchange amongst the people who are transiting the traffic. But you still need to do the statistical analysis, tracing back to the individual agents and all that. You might get there, you might not, but it's a part of the solution.
Well, I have one more comment. I think we're trying to solve a problem, but we're not sure it's solvable. What we also should consider is, rather than trying to remedy the problem entirely, is to think about how can we survive in a situation like this. Put some more effort into survivability research and say, okay, we cannot solve the problem necessarily, but let's see how our systems can still continue to function in a hostile environment. How can we configure a system or reconfigure them under attack so that we can continue doing business?
Resilience.
Survivability.
yeah, in fact, the research that my company sprang out of was all DARPA funded and survivable networking. We were looking at just these problems because I really think that I actually believe this is a solvable problem. I don't think that this is insurmountable, and I think that it really becomes a traffic engineering problem. We already have problems today with even just the core protocols of the internet being completely insecure, BGP and well, not only insecure but in some cases non-functional, before it's going to take some time to address those problems. But I think that there are plenty of ways we can do this, and not necessarily all through rewriting protocols or standards, but by better collaboration, by building tools, and through saner traffic engineering.
I think in the short and middle term, we have heard that we have some pretty good technical and maybe our legal approaches, but mostly technical approaches to this problem. But in the long term, I think it's an education problem. In the really long term, people will start to think differently about the internet, and maybe people. It should be a little bit harder for people in the long term to use it, and that's like in security administration education and generally all IT-related education should focus more on security, and that's like what I see as a solution.
I want to thank the audience for great questions and thank the panel for the discussion.